we'll see how this goes. We'll reserve judgment for later. But happy to have Howard Burkholz. He is on the West Coast and just flew in from imaging in Tennessee, so he's been working real hard already this week. He's a photographer as well as an Allstate insurance representative, and we're happy he's a sponsor for our Rhode Island Association, so we appreciate that from him. And he's here to tell us a little bit about the risk areas that we should be aware of as photographers. Of course, he offers insurance programs to cover any of the risks he's talking about. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to him individually. The chat box is open. So if we have questions, and you can click that chat box open on your computer screen, and let him know as we go along if there's any questions that come up. So Howard, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, welcome, and thank you for the opportunity to share some information to you. I value your time, and so I'll try to keep it poignant and on focus, and not get distracted with a lot of side information. I understand with PPA, one of the real values of the PPA organization and program is the education component of the organization. And so I'll try to keep this education and oriented, so information, so that you can have some value to the time that we spend together. I have to just mention that because what we'll be talking a lot is about insurance and coverages. This information that I'll share is advisory in nature, and it doesn't guarantee coverages. There are many policies out there, many unique carriers. So in coverages, and the information I speak about is broad in nature, and so please refer to your specific insurance policy for exact coverages. What we'll be talking about is managing the risks that professional photographers face. A good risk management program is designed to prevent mayhem, meaning we change our behavior, or we behave a certain way. But once something goes wrong, and it can, then we have a solution-oriented approach to risk management, and that's the insurance side of it. So I'm going to be talking both about the behavior and the insurance, the preventative stuff that we can do, as well as the reactive stuff that we can do. Together, our goal is to set up a customized program of prevention and when something goes wrong, response. When a person does take out an insurance policy, what they're doing is transferring the risk of financial loss from your pocket to a third party, in this case an insurance carrier. That way you pay a premium and they assume the risks that you don't want to. Some risks aren't that great, and so you may be comfortable assuming them. So the foundation of any sound management program when it comes to insurance is called a BOP, a business owner's policy. It's very much under the auspice of a homeowner's policy. A homeowner's policy, as you know, covers a multitude of coverages, liability, property, dwelling, all kinds of things, medical, and so on. And that's exactly what this does for a small business. So the way I've organized this is to just pick a risk exposure, and then talk about what we can do behaviorally to control the risk, and then second, if something does go wrong, how the insurance can respond. So the first I'd like to talk about is liability. So if you're doing a photo shoot and harm comes to your client, then you're at risk of legal action or financial damages becoming your obligation. In this photograph, we see that a creative photographer took a client into an area that could have a slick surface, or a wave, an unexpected wave strikes them. and off they go, and we have problems. We have so first, behaviorally, be careful. Don't take your client into a situation that could put them at risk or cause them harm, and be aware of that. Use good judgment and sound planning. The other risk that we have is the damage to the property of others. In this photograph, I found a photographer who was following the Tour de France in 2013. In this particular image, he chose an area of the course to cross the track. He obviously, I would assume, chose a point of time, he thought, in which the bicyclists weren't going to be coming, so he crosses the track. But what if he had made a mistake in that, his judgment, and crossed the track just as a slew of bikers come around the corner and hit him, and he takes them out and causes both bodily injury as well as property damage? Those bicycles can be over $100,000 for a professional tour bike, with all the time and the money and the design that they put into it. So be careful, right? When you're moving about, make sure that you don't cause bodily injury or property damage, harms to others. Yesterday, when I was in imaging, a customer of mine said, thank you for my insurance with you. She was shooting a wedding, and she moved a sofa with some help. Other people helped her across a room at a wedding reception venue, and placed it in front of a window. And in the process, the floor was damaged. It was a gouge in the floor as they slid the sofa, apparently. And it was a $4,800 repair that her insurance policy paid. So that would all come under this coverage called general liability. So general liability is an insurance portion that responds to harm to others' body and harm to others' property. So most policies cover $1 million per occurrence limit, $2 million of aggregate. The word aggregate means multiple claims in a 12-month policy period. So you can have two $1 million claims, or 10 $20,000 claims. As long as the per occurrence doesn't go over $1 million, the annual aggregate is over $2 million, the insurance policy continues to pay. We do have higher limits available. More and more photographers are telling me that the $1 million, $2 million isn't going to fill the bill for some venue or some client that's asking for higher limits. So the 2 million, 4 million is available. It's not super expensive either to double your liability limits. By the way, something I'll point out with this is this coverage comes with a legal team on retainer. Remember, an accusation of negligence is all that it takes anymore in our litigious world, and that would trigger an investigation by a claims department and a legal defense. So if someone even accuses you of something that is harm to their body or harm to their property, we file a claim. It starts a process of investigation, including a legal defense. So essentially, when you take out a policy, you're buying a retainer essentially for a legal defense in the event that someone accuses you of being causing them bodily or property harm. A lot of times I'm asked, what about certificates of insurance? Of course, when you go to a venue, often the venue will say, we need to be added to your policy as an additional insured, and send us a certificate of insurance. Our certificates are free of charge, so you can get unlimited number of certificates to unlimited number of clients or venues or parks or national parks or state parks, whatever you're doing. We can get you as many certificates as you need. They're free. There is a once a year fee of $26 to have the additional insured endorsement present on your policy. Some clients don't need this, they don't want it, and so we don't put the endorsement on. Once the endorsement's on, though, of course, the certificates are free of charge. Okay, another situation is I wanted to just explore, because bodily injury to others can be tricky. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about this. In this image, ask yourself if this person is a client and says, well, I'm a tornado chaser and I want you to follow me into tornado's way. And if she becomes harmed, will your liability insurance cover her for the injury that she is caused? And the answer is most likely yes. Liability to others is a coverage when the person injured is a third party, so not yourself or not your employees. So most likely it could be covered. What I advise people to do, again, back to the behavior, who's initiated the shock creative? If it was your idea and you put your client at risk by coming up with this brilliant idea that causes harm to her, then your policy would most likely be responsible because you'd be found negligent for putting her in harm's way. But if it's her idea and she says, well, I want to do this because this will be for my portfolio and advertising and so on, I want you to get pictures of me chasing a tornado, make sure you get a signed waiver that defines that you advised this client against it and don't believe it's a good idea, and you're going to have a 500mm lens so you're far away as possible from the tornado. So you get the idea there is use your judgment, but advise a customer who wants to do something that sounds risky that they're doing this at their own risk, and have them sign a waiver of some kind that your legal advice could provide. What if this is a hired model or a subcontractor? They actually can be covered under general liability. And although we're going to talk a little bit about whether it would be general liability for your employee or if it's workers' comp. And it does depend on state law, and I'll get to that on the next slide. If this is you or your employee, general liability from a bot does not cover you. Liability in its definition means harm to others, a third party. So you yourself would not, if you were injured, would not have any ability to get bills paid for your own injury or for the injury of your employees. So, okay. Using subcontractors. So when you hire a subcontractor, state law determines if they are classified as an employee with respect to injury to themselves on the job. So, and again, I'm going to address that in a slide in just a second. But remember that if your subcontractor does harm to another person's body, a client, the public, something like that, then your policy does respond. So people ask me that a lot. So again, the subcontractor in this example isn't being harmed, but the subcontractor in the practice of a shoot causes harm to another person's body or property, then your policy would protect you and the subcontractor. So that's important to know. Now, your bot liability does cover the activities of your employees and your subcontractors related to bot. Oh, I already said that. Okay, now, I do always ask you to think through this a little bit. If you're building a home and you're a contractor, so in the case of running your business, you're the photographer, and you hire a plumber building a building, do you want the mistake or the problem that the plumber causes to fall on your insurance? Well, the answer is no. You want to make sure that the subcontractor has their own insurance. And so when a general contractor building a home hires a plumber, he says to the plumber, I want you to add me to your policy as an additional insured, and I want you to provide me with a certificate showing you have insurance and you've done that. So what that does is it separates and it defines up front whose policy is going to be responsible for whose mistake, whose negligence. That way, when the plumber makes a mistake, the plumber's policy pays the claim, not your policy, the general. And I have a photographer in Colorado who does schools. He does all of the school shoots for 3 school districts, and he has something like 12 or 14 subcontractors. He requires every subcontractor to get their own insurance policy, and that way, if they mess up, their insurance takes the hit, not his. And he just requires it of them to do it that way. That's just a concept that I like to educate folks on. So. Okay. So yeah, so we talked. So just to summarize, have a contract and a waiver of liability if your client tries to do a shoot or ask you to do a shoot in which harm could come to others. And then protect yourself by having your subcontractors carry their own insurance policy if they can. And then general liability does not protect you. From injury to yourself if you get hurt. So you need to have major medical insurance, and employees, you need to have workers' comp for them. So let's talk a little bit about workers' comp. I just went to the New York State workers' comp website, and I thought this is an interesting principle. According to the New York workers' comp law, independent contractors that you hire are not eligible for workers' compensation coverage, and employers are not required to purchase coverage for them. However, there have been cases where some employers have deliberately misclassified employees as independent contractors in order to avoid paying payroll taxes and workers' comp insurance. It must be pointed out that the final definition of an employee or an independent contractor is not left up to you, the employer, but by the state. New York workers' compensation law specifies that an employee or an independent contractor is defined by the circumstances surrounding the person's work. And then they went on in this next slide to define what that is. So if you have the right to control someone, even though they're a subcontractor, as though they were an employee, then they could classify you as classify that person as an employee. The character of the work that is performed is consistent with the primary work performed by the hiring business indicates as an employee. So if you're treating an employee that you have as a W-2 employee, the exact same way you're treating a subcontractor when it comes to your shoots and your workflow, they would say this is really an employee, not a subcontractor. How you pay them, and then do you furnish equipment and materials, and then right to hire and fire. So just be aware of that just because you decide you want to not have employees and have subs does not always make it so. So that's something to be aware of. Okay, another one, a drone is becoming a very, very popular practice now in photography. So when you're flying your drone, you could cause as a risk damage to others' property and injury to others. If this drone strikes someone or strikes something, it causes damage. Many carriers won't cover this, they'll exclude it. They'll just have an exclusion on the policy that we don't do it. So when you're flying it, you might think you have insurance, but you don't. So it's important to understand what your current policy does and doesn't do with respect to drones. Once you determine that and ascertain that it doesn't cover your drone liability, I recommend for beginners or people who are just entering this, not beginners, sorry, you have to get certified and all that stuff. You're not necessarily a beginner, but once you get active in this, if you're doing a dozen flights a year or something like that, there's a company out there called Verifly. They're a pay-by-the-flight company, and they're an app on your smartphone. You open the app, and it tests the airspace. It says this is a green fly area, and you buy the flight for $1 million. You buy $1 million of liability coverage. You take the flight. It charges you $10 to $20, something like that for a flight. So if you're doing a dozen flights a year, this is the way to go. Once you start doing, you're paying Verifly in excess of $600 a year. It's cheaper to get an annual policy, and we do offer that. It's about $600 a year. People always kind of ask me, what does that cost? So about $600 a year, and you can add that to your risk management program. It's not a BOP, it's a separate policy that goes along with a BOP. So, okay. Very good. Okay, and then something else, this is a behavioral thing. It's not a responsive thing, but I recommend that you, if you're not already, that you create or set up an LLC rather than practice your business as a sole proprietor. A sole proprietor who makes an error and say they don't have any insurance, they'll go after all the assets of the sole proprietor. So you can lose the equity in your home, you can lose your 401k, you can lose all kinds of whatever your assets are, they can go after. If you create an LLC, you're operating as a separate entity, and only the assets of that LLC can be at risk. So if they do wade their way all the way through the limit of your liability on your insurance policy and start going after assets, it's best if they can only go after your cameras and lenses, if those are the only assets you have in your LLC, versus the sole proprietor, they can go after your cameras and lenses and your house and your any other assets, your rental properties, your so on. So anyway, and nowadays 90% of what people create are LLCs, not S corps, which is another way of doing it, but the LLC seems to dominate and be the driver now for that. So okay, another risk that photographers have is what they call professional liability, or errors and omissions. What if you don't show up at an event and you wrote down the wrong date, and it's somebody's wedding and they don't have any images for their once in a lifetime event? You can be found to be professionally liable. Losing or damaged memory cards after completing a job. The legal precedence now is if you shoot a wedding, for example, and you don't have any images, the expense of recreating the shoot fall upon you under a breach of contract or failure to deliver photographic products. So you have to buy flowers, buy a cake, rent the venue, rent the tuxes, clean the dress, fly grandma in from out of town, and restage a shoot so that they have their wedding images, and that expense falls upon you. And again, that is the legal precedence now in the industry when that happens. So, what if you images are released incorrectly to the wrong party, and they bring legal damage against you for problems that way? Reshooting expenses we talked about, and then other legal fees and court costs. So the solution for that is a coverage called professional liability, or errors and omissions. It's like malpractice for a physician. It's designed to protect and insure you against legal obligations that arise out of the professional errors and negligent acts or omissions during the course of practicing your profession. And we have that. By the way, of all of the coverages I see missing when someone sends me a copy of their policy and says, "Howard, interpret this for me. What do I have?" That's it. They don't have professional liability coverage. This is missing in many cases. So, yeah. Okay. The next, there are some endorsements on the policy. In the case of errors and omissions, or this professional liability, the negligent, an element of negligence needs to exist for this coverage to be triggered and for it to engage and for the insurance policy to respond by paying a bill that comes in. There is another type of coverage that's called failure to deliver photographic products, and it's a no questions asked coverage. So it pays the sum that a photographer becomes obligated to pay regardless of negligence. So negligent trigger is not required. There's a $5,000 limit on this coverage. There's a $250 deductible, where this coverage has a $1,000 deductible when a situation like that occurs. So if you're doing just, I do landscape photography, I'm not worried about this at all, because if my photos don't work out, I'll just go look for another sunset, right? But if you are working with the public, and for example, let's say you're a portrait shooter and a family's coming in with 15 people, and some of them come in from out of town, and there's expenses to their travel, and you shoot their family shots, and something goes wrong with your images, then you would possibly be faced with the expenses of bringing them back into town, and it could add up. So this is a no questions asked, kind of a no negligence trigger required coverage. So I like this when you're dealing with the public, if you're working a lot with portrait or family shoots. Okay, another we're going to talk about equipment now, and then I'll come back to this one point right here. Okay, so equipment is another risk that you have. A lot of you have a lot of money invested into equipment. It could be damaged or stolen. I had a client who was shooting on the edge of a canyon and the wind caught his gear and his tripod tipped over and I think his Nikon D5D Mark something. No, that's a Canon, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but it was a $7,000 claim, and we paid that. So this is an important in claims handling of equipment. There are two ways to settle equipment coverage. One is called a replacement cost settlement. So there's no depreciation. They give you what it costs today to buy a new camera, the camera that you have. And if that camera is no longer manufactured or made, the closest camera with similar specs, they pay new, including shipping and sales tax. It's all paid for, everything. You only have your deductible. Actual cash value is a depreciated claim settlement. So those of you who are, well, you're all PPA members. So as a PPA member, if you're a member of National PPA, as well as the chapter, you have $15,000 of coverage. It's called Inland Marine with your membership. It comes with your membership, the entry-level coverage that they offer. They have a built-in depreciation schedule. From what I've been told, it's 10% per year as the item ages. So any equipment that you have that's over 4 years old is now worth 60 cents on the dollar. So they immediately depreciate 40% of it. You're going to get 60% on the value minus your deductible. And then that's what you get after that goes. So big difference between replacement cost and actual cash value. So this fellow, MJ, told me I could read this and use this as a Facebook post. He said, remember that one time that I was photographing a gorgeous wedding at a $30 million mansion and I accidentally backed up and fell in their indoor swimming pool with 2 cameras in hand? Well, that was tonight. And a lot of people responded and he said, you guys are all wonderful. I should check my posts more often. Anyway, I just got wet. Cameras are still dry. Thank you for being so kind all as well. So had the cameras gone in the drink, replacement cost new, everything's brand new. Actual cash value depreciated. So that's kind of important to distinguish from. Yeah. Okay, we do a lot of rented equipment certificates. So this coverage also extends to rental equipment. When you rent something, they want to put a deposit on your credit card for the value of the item. And we can avoid that. You don't have to put any deposits on your credit card for anything. Just let us know and we generate a certificate. And now you can rent to your heart's delight and avoid the security deposit on the items. So, okay, now back to this, the BOP a little bit. Let's talk, before I move on, let's see. Oh yeah, we'll get to that on the next one. Okay, so there is some wording on a BOP that is incredibly difficult to understand in my view, and especially for the lay person who doesn't dig into policies. The reason why so many people have engaged me to help them with their insurance is because I read the fine print and I tell people up front, not when the claim is being denied, because they're saying, well, this happened this way and therefore it's not covered. So let me explain a couple of things. There's a wording on all BOPs, and I've read them all: Hartford, Traveler, CNA, Hiscox, Allstate. They all have this wording in it. It says, we will cover your camera equipment from water damage if the loss is incidental to the land portion of your journey. So for example, if you go across the Mississippi River and you drop your camera in the river, they will say, yeah, that's incidental to the land portion of your journey. But if you are on the Colorado doing a 5-day river run, or you're out in the ocean photographing whales off the Puget Sound, and your camera gets ruined, they will say that is not incidental to the land portion of your journey. So they will not cover your gear on a BOP. Okay, so that's really important. There's a few other situations like that. One more is theft from an unattended vehicle. If your camera equipment is in a car and they smash the window and they steal it, it would be covered under the BOP coverage, because there's wording that says there has to be evidence of physical break-in. But what if the thief uses a little, they have a metal rod that the police use to slide it down the window, and they pop the lock and they open your door and there's no damage to your car whatsoever? Well, the criminals have those too. And they also have a device now where they sit in a car next to yours, and it's an electronic device that simulates fob codes. And the fob code hits your car, fob count, and it unlocks your doors and they steal all your gear. Well, when you file a claim, the adjuster is going to say there was no sign of physical break-in, therefore you left your door unlocked. Well, no, I didn't. Well, that's how we determine whether you left your door unlocked. So this is the conversation. This is how this goes. So BOPs have gaps in them. They have holes in them, right? And so what we do in my office is we combine a BOP with an inland marine. And so now, let me give you the definition of inland marine. When the colonies were in the United States, or when the colonies were in the Americas, and the British merchants were shipping material across land and across sea, Lloyd's of London created one of the first insurance products ever to be created in modern history. And it was called an inland marine, and it covered the merchants' merchandise as they were shipping it across the land and across the sea, and it stuck. And what it really means is mobile, away from your premises. It means out in the world. That's kind of what inland marine means. So what we do is we combine a BOP with an inland marine. The inland marine policy that, not all policies do this, by the way, most don't, but Allstate's is worldwide equipment coverage. And so we use inland marine as a backup coverage, because those gaps I told you about, water, theft from an unattended vehicle, and some others, camera losses outside the country, are covered under inland marine where they're not covered under the BOP. So since we've used this strategy of combining a BOP with inland marine, we have never had a claim denied for camera equipment, never. And so that's a pretty bold statement. I have over 3,000 photographers insured, and we've never had a claim denied. So that's pretty powerful and pretty bold of me to state that is absolutely true. Now, inland marine settles your camera equipment on an actual cash value basis. I've had some wonderful experiences with inland marine with Allstate. They don't have a built-in depreciation like the PPA does. I had a client who had a $3,000 Olympus lens that he dropped out of the country, and Allstate depreciated it by $60. And he told me I could use his name because he wrote a public article on it. His name's Scott Bourne. He runs a website called Photo Focus. He has over 200,000 photography following his site. So Photo Focus, Scott Bourne, $60 depreciation on a $3,000 lens. So because professional lenses do hold their cameras very good. I don't believe a 5-year-old digital body would only be a $60 depreciation. I think it would be more in an actual cash value claim settlement, even with Allstate. Okay, another risk, and we're almost done, by the way. Another risk is loss of business income and extra expense. Let's say hypothetically that your camera bag was stolen from your car while parked outside your studio just hours before a shoot. You had no time to rent gear. You're going to lose money. The camera is damaged when you drop it. There's time to rent a camera. The coverage pays for rental and replacement equipment so you don't lose income while your camera is being repaired. Or maybe your studio is in a fire, broken pipe, vandalism. The extra expense can help you to set up a temporary location during the repair of your studio, should you be displaced. I did have a claim like that. I had a studio in Northern California that was completely annihilated with a fire, the whole studio gone. And the equipment and everything was right around $45,000 in claim settlement. But the loss of income he suffered because he couldn't conduct his shoots for the next 4 months until he was set up again, paid for a temporary location, and the income he lost during the transition period between his inability to shoot at his studio and setting up his temporary location. So a lot of money was paid to him to help him through the income situation during that fire. So anyway, that's a really good coverage as well, and it's a risk you face, and there is a solution through insurance. And then here's another one. There's a damage to a premises you rent. So let's say you go to a hotel to photograph a bunch of seniors doing their day pictures or something like that, and the seniors all go in the bathroom and destroy the bathroom, and the hotel charges you for it. So you are covered against damage to premises rented to you. Some photographers are home-based photographers, and they'll occasionally rent the studio of another photographer. And if you were to be at that location and cause harm or damage, then your policy would cover you. So that's why when you rent a studio, some studio owners now ask you to have insurance so that their policy doesn't have to take the claim if you cause harm to someone else. Okay, here's another one. And I wish I had this. Did I put this in here? Oh, I didn't, darn it. Okay, so there's a client, she lives in Tennessee. She lives in Utah. She had a Rhode disk drive system. It's 4 disks and they mirror each other, and it went bad, and she lost 6 terabytes of data. She said it was close to 10 years of her work was all on this Rhode system. She sent it into a company called Disk Savers, or Drive Savers, sorry, Drive Savers. They were at the imaging the other day too. Yesterday I saw them, and I went to their booth and said hi to them. Anyway, it was $6,800 to restore those drives, and Allstate paid the claim under data recovery coverage. So it's very, very good, very useful, very specific to photographers. Another one, this Barbara, she used to live in Washington, Oregon, and she moved to Tennessee. I just completed a corporate headshot for a company and left my SD card in my laptop. I put it in my backpack, camera bag, and forgot to take the card out. I went to download the images. The card's bent, it won't work. And what do? She's able to send the card in, and they will recover all the images, and it saved her the pain of flying back and the embarrassment of reshooting everything. So Gilware is a good one. Drive Savers is a good one. Anyway, there's a fair number of companies that do this. I'm going to skip that. And also, last one, cyber hacks. We have a coverage now on our policy, the Allstate policy, called Cyber Suite. It does add a bit of expense, a couple $100 a year, but does anyone know anything about site hacking? All my sites have been hacked. Can't log into WordPress. Tried to change my password. They send out 60,000 emails have been sent from my email address. Already changed my email password. I called SiteLock. Initially, they quoted her $55 a month, and then it was $275 a month, and yada yada, right? So she wanted some help. But anyway, so cyber insurance is available. Data compromise. What if someone hacks your computer and does ransomware and says, pay us a fee or we won't release your computer to you, right? All of this stuff now is available to buy insurance for. And it's actually, they say that dropping a computer or a camera, is the highest risk that a camera or a photographer faces. The second highest risk actually is a cyber security issue, and then the next one is the professional liability. And actually, surprisingly enough, general liability, harm to others and others' property, is actually the least riskiest of the 4. They say that's the least risky. So. All right, so that's it. I tried to cover the points, keep it to 48 minutes. Dang it, we started at 5 after. I went too long. I tried to keep it to 40 minutes, so I apologize for that. And we can open it up to any question. And if you're interested or would like to spread the word to your other members, this website, nationalphotographersinsurance.com, it's where the banner that's on your website points. Anyway, so if you just go to your own association website, click on my banner, it'll go to this site, and we're happy to customize a proposal for you and help you with what you need. So can I unmute everybody now and see if there are any questions? Let me unmute. Let's start unmuting folks. Okay. Any questions from you?
So Howard, can you hear me?
Yes, yep.
Okay, so the insurance that's offered as part of our PPA membership, do these kind of dovetail with yours, or does that never get used at all?
That's a very, very good question. So earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that we put together a BOP, which does the most everything that you've heard about on here. The inland marine that we put with the BOP, partner with the BOP, is a backup coverage for circumstances or situations in which the BOP doesn't cover the equipment. And they are few, but they can happen. And so that's kind of a backup coverage. So as a member of PPA with the free insurance that you get with your membership, you have that. So you would not necessarily need to get an inland marine policy from us because you have that with your membership. Some people like ours because it doesn't have such a severe depreciation schedule, a built-in depreciation schedule that they have based on the age. Because remember, I have a Nikon 28 millimeter f1.4 lens that I paid $2,100 for. It's my prime lens that I use for landscape. And if that were 40% off, it's already 2 years old. Another 2 years, it'll be, 40% off of that. Doesn't leave a lot of money left. Now I'm getting, 60 cents on the dollar. Where with Allstate, I know it would be covered for. They hold their value tremendously. A lens like that, it's not going to depreciate more than a couple $100 over 10 years. It may never. It might even go up in value. Frankly, it might even go up because it's such a high-end lens. So that would be my only point there. Oh, and by the way, I didn't put my flyer up on here, but our average BOP policy, except in Massachusetts, where Allstate is not available, so sorry about that. Our average BOP policy is about $300 a year, so it's not $310 a year roughly. And then to add our inland marine on top of it is $100. So you could opt to not add that $100 inland marine a year from Allstate and just go with your PPA inland marine coverage that comes with your membership. And then Massachusetts, we do have coverage in Massachusetts, but it's through Hiscox, Hartford, Travelers, CNA, one of the other carriers that we represent. And a little more money, a little bit more money, unfortunately, but not much. It's not horrible.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, Deborah, it's all yours to close this out if you'd like to.
All right. So thank you, everybody. If you